I made this video 4 years ago, and it can be found on my channel today. And in that video I say that Harry Weatherford was on one of these roofs here, the loading dock roof or the small building roof, during the assassination and shortly after the assassination. I think this is Harry here in the earlier part of the film clip. And this here is Harry climbing into the second floor window of the loading dock roof. And this is not a disputed fact. Harry himself says that he climbed into the window. And I also say that there are some items on the roof near Harry when he goes in the window, that one of those items is a rifle that had been used on the 5th floor, and I think we have walkie-talkies also present. Though they don't look like walkie-talkies in the picture, I think perhaps they are in bags of some sort. Now here I'm going to go over Harry's story a little bit. I'm not going to read that, but he did file a report on November 23rd saying what he did, and he mentions other people. He mentions Deputy Alan Sweat, Deputy Eugene Boone, and Deputy Luke Mooney. And so, comparing what Harry says to what they say, Alan Sweat does say that he was with Deputy Weatherford in the railroad yard, but he says that, and I have that in yellow there, I continued towards the railroad yards with Deputy Harry Weatherford. But in red he says Deputy Harry Weatherford went into the building through an open window on the 1st floor. Now, Harry Weatherford did not go into the building but via an open window on the 1st floor. The picture we have shows him going into a window on the 2nd floor. And this can't be the way he entered the building. That is, he had to have been in the building already and come out the window and then gone back in it. So, although Alan Sweat apparently supports Harry Weatherford's story, he does it with an impossible story. And I think that means that Alan Sweat has fabricated his story in order to support Harry Weatherford's story. Because Harry Weatherford did not enter the building by way of that window. He had entered the building prior to that and come out the window and then went back in because it's a 2nd floor window. And Harry also mentions Deputy Boone. And he said he mentions him twice as being in front of the sheriff's office. And on the right-hand side, Boone, in the white there, does say he was in front of the sheriff's office, but he doesn't mention anyone else who was with him there. And then Weatherford also says that he was about 10 feet from Boone when he found the rifle. That is, when Boone found the rifle. He also says with a light he was using, and I think this is before the lights had been brought into the building. But anyway, Mr. Ball, on the right again, asks Deputy Boone who was with him when he found the rifle. And he says Officer Mooney was out there, I believe, and several of the office personnel, women in the office, clerk, typist, and what have you, Ralph Walters, who's a deputy, Buddy Walters, who's a deputy, Alan Sweat, who's a deputy, L.C. Smith, who's a deputy, Officer Gramstaff, I'm not sure who he is. That is about all I can remember. So even though he specifically asked who was with him, Deputy Boone does not mention that that Harry Weatherford was there. So Harry Weatherford singles out Boone as somebody that was present when he was present, that is when the rifle was discovered, but Boone doesn't remember him. And Harry also says he was present when Deputy Mooney discovered the sniper's nest. But Deputy Mooney doesn't mention Harry. At this time, Officers Webster, Victory, and McCurley came over to this spot, and we guarded this spot until crime lab officers got upstairs within a matter of a few minutes. We then turned this area over to Captain Fritz and his officers for processing. At this time, I continued to search the 6th floor along with many other officers, and within a few minutes I heard Deputy Sheriff Eugene Boone holler out that he had found the rifle near the staircase between some rows of cartons. So in Mooney's account, he does not mention Weatherford. But two of the deputies that Weatherford mentions as being present when he was present don't mention them, even though one of them was specifically asked, not whether Weatherford was there, but who else was there. And the Deputy Alan Sweat corroboration, I think, is a fabrication. And in his report, Weatherford also says, I then climbed into the window and started searching the first floor with an unknown DPD detective. That unknown detective must be Detective B.L. Sankel. He said in his report here, they were at Parkland Hospital where this begins. We proceeded to scene of the shooting, arrived at the Texas School Book Depository, Houston and Elm Street, at about 12:50 p.m., November 22, 1963. I met Deputy Sheriff Harry Weatherford at the rear door. Weatherford and I entered the building and proceeded to check building from ground floor upward. I got to the 6th floor at 1:10 p.m. The empty hulls were found at the window about 1:15 p.m. Captain Fritz, Detective Sims, and Boyd were present at this time. Now, this gets a little complex because there are two discoveries of the sniper's nest, and Sankel is present for the second one, and apparently Weatherford is too. But at this discovery, Captain Fritz is already there, so it's not the Mooney discovery that's happening here. I don't want to try to sort that out in this video, but Sankel tells a different story than Harry. Sankel says he met Harry outside the building, and at a time too late to be Harry's initial entry. This has to be after he had been outside on the out the window and back in again. Sankel says both are present at the discovery, but this is not the Mooney discovery. And Harry doesn't remember Sankel's name. And the reason he doesn't remember Sankel's name is because he knows that Sankel's story isn't going to match his story, because Sankel has no reason to lie, and Harry does. So Harry is lying about his story because he's got these items here that he must do something with, and he doesn't want you to know about that. Now, in that 4-year-old video, I go over this, why I think there's a gun. I think the photography supports that. On the picture on the right here, you see 3 separate frames of film in one frame of video. That's why it looks like there's 3 long items there, which I think is the rifle. The frame rate of the original film was faster than the frame rate of the video comes from, and there's 3 frames of film there, and therefore it looks like 3 rifles. And I think, as I explained in that video, I think walkie-talkies were dropped out of probably the 5th floor, the 6th floor, and maybe even the 7th floor. So I think that Harry Weatherford gathered up those items with the intent of disposing of them in some way. And Harry's window, the same window that Harry Weatherford is climbing into, just happens to be outside of the 2nd floor lunchroom. Not immediately, there's a vestibule sort of room there, and in that room, the vestibule, there's a door with a glass window. You can see through that glass, and the bright area is in the window that Harry Weatherford climbs into. So Harry Weatherford's window, where he's got those items that he wants to dispose of, is right next to the lunchroom. And this diagram shows what I'm getting at. The window is circled on the left there in red, and the B represents Baker, where Baker encountered Oswald. So this window that Harry is climbing into is right where Baker and Truly encounter Oswald. That's interesting. And 1 floor below that is where Roy Truly hollered up the elevator shaft. Turn loose the elevator. When you say call up, in what kind of voice did you call? Real loud. I suppose in an excited voice, but loud enough that anyone could have heard me if they had not been overstacking or making a little noise. But I rang the bell and pushed this button. And how many times did you yell? That? 2 times. And Mr. Bellum asked Marion Baker, how many times did he holler, to the best of your recollection? It seemed like he did it twice. So Roy Truly hollers up the elevator shaft twice, and he's 1 floor below where they're going to meet Oswald, and where Harry Weatherford is crawling into the window. So I think that Roy truly is warning his co-conspirators that something's up and the plan is off. And now I want to get to Buell in the basement. Buell Wesley Frazier. Mr. Ball asks him, "Then you went back into the building, did you?" "Right. And police officers came in there?" "Yes, sir. I would say by the time, some of us went back in, and it wasn't just a few minutes. I say there were several." "Did you stay on the first floor?" "Well, stayed on the first floor there for a few minutes, and I hadn't eaten my lunch, so I had my lunch down there in the basement, and I went down there to get my lunch and eat it, and I walked back up to the first floor there." "When you came back into the building, you came in the front door, didn't you?" "Right. Did you go down to the basement immediately, or did you stand around on the first floor?" "No, sir. I stood around for several minutes there, and then, eventually the ones who hadn't eaten their lunch, some of them had taken their lunch outside." "Did other people go downstairs with you?" "No, sir, they didn't." "You went down there alone, did you?" "Yes, sir." "Did you see anybody after that come into the building while you were there?" "You mean somebody other that didn't work there?" "A police officer?" "No, sir. I stood there a few minutes, Then you went back into the building, did you?" "Right. And before you went back into the building, no police officer came up the steps and into the building?" "Not that I know." And people will interpret this differently. What I think it means is that Frazier did immediately go back into the building. He went back into the building before Marion Baker ran into the building. Otherwise, he would have seen Marion Baker run into the building, and that he went immediately to the basement. And the back elevators go all the way down to the basement. The front elevator doesn't go to the basement, but no doubt the elevator shaft still goes down there and has moving parts down there. And no doubt the elevator's power can be shut off in the basements. And Buell Wesley Frazier is in the basement. So I surmise that Truly stopped at the elevators and hollered in order to warn Oswald and Weatherford that he and Officer Baker were coming up, because Weatherford was going to hand his items from the loading dock roof through the window to Oswald, who was going to drop them down the elevator shaft to Buell Wesley Frazier in the basement. Now, about the power situation regarding the elevators. The back elevators had been shut off by the time that Truly and Baker got there, but the power had been turned back on again by the time that Mooney got there. And they were shut off again while Deputy Mooney was on the second floor. You can determine this from the testimony of Mooney. And the front elevator was running when Sarah Stanton immediately re-entered the building, but it had been shut off again by the time that Vicki Adams had gone back in at about 12:38. So the power to the elevators is being turned off and on again. So I surmise that Frazier shut off the back elevators in anticipation of Weatherford's items being dropped down the back elevator shaft from the second floor. Then when the Officer Baker problem developed, he turned the power back on. Then after Baker had gone to the roof and while Mooney was on the second floor, Frazier again turned off the power to the back elevators. The items were dropped, the back elevator power was turned back on again, and then Frazier brought the items to the front elevator shaft and shut off that elevator so that he could hide the items at the bottom of the front elevator shaft. And no doubt it would be dangerous to go into the area underneath the front elevator with the power on, because if it suddenly starts up, you get these moving parts, maybe even exposed electrical wires. You would want to shut off the power before you went under that elevator. Even if it doesn't come down to the basement, it's still going to have some kind of moving parts there. So it would be a relatively safe place to hide in a prepared spot so that it wasn't visible, and you're not going to have people going in there looking carefully, probably. Especially since they've already discovered the sniper's nest and the rifle. Why would they care? Why would they bother? And no doubt these items were later removed. So that explains what happened to Harry's items.